and Planning Applications Committee. Can I start by asking if there are any apologies for absence? And I noticed that Councillor Susie Hicks is not here, but Councillor McGrath is. Right, acknowledged. Everyone else, I think, is here are members of the committee, no other substitutes. Thank you. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Okay, that's great. I'll take that silence as none. Then the next is the minutes of the last meeting we held, which was on the 25th of September. Are these an accurate record of the deliberations and discussions on that day? Right, so it's everyone's wish that I sign them, which I'll do now. Thank you. Right, I'll announce the order of items and the supplementary items. We actually have one item on the agenda, a substantive item, so there's no need to spend any more time on item 4, and we can move straight on to item 5, which is the Mitcham Gasworks site. We do have, so I'm going to ask Wendy to introduce the item and do the presentation. We have some representatives from the applicant. I understand Simon Lewis is going to be speaking for the time there. We also have, for our discussions later on, we have Guy Ingham, who's a viability consultant here in the chamber, and we have Mustafa Khan from Legal Online for any questions we may wish to direct to them subsequently. Don't mind. Right. And so without further ado then, can I ask Wendy if you would start the presentation?
Good evening, Chair and members. I want to take this opportunity to draw your attention to the mod sheet accompanying this application. So in front of you is a variation of conditions application to the original gasworks scheme that received the resolution to grant by this committee in July last year. This application has been submitted, has been submitted to vary a number of planning and conditions to allow for a number of amendments. The key changes when compared to the original scheme are as follows. So the increase in unit numbers from 579 units to 626 units, a reduction in height to buildings fronting Hay Drive and Portland Road. There's a reduction in footprint. There's an increase in public realm by approximately 460 square meters. There's improvement in overall carbon reduction from 56 to 76%. This also being a scheme providing 100% private units with no affordable housing provision. Some members here this evening would have also been on the committee in July this year, where you have reviewed another scheme for the provision of a scheme that's designed to cater for the requirements of a registered provider, that being Scheme 2. So for clarity, the external amendments presented under this scheme, which we will call Scheme 3, is very similar to that previously approved under Scheme 2. The predominant difference between Scheme 2 and 3, this scheme, is the change in unit mix and tenure. This now comprises a much higher quantum of smaller units and is provided as a 100% private scheme. This table shows the key differences in unit mix between the 3 schemes, 2 of which this committee have already considered. So this slide shows the reduced footprint to allow for an increase in public realm within the development. So these slides are images showing the scheme with a red line in the image on the right hand, indicating the outline of the first scheme. As detailed in the mod sheet, members are informed that whilst this scheme is submitted as a 100% private scheme, the applicant has already engaged with GLA Housing and Grant Team on numerous occasions over the past few months which is demonstrating a strong commitment to provide a quantum affordable housing on this site. Officers have also secured an additional head of terms in the deed of variation, requiring the applicant to use reasonable endeavours to secure grant funding to increase the affordable housing provision to a minimum of 146 units. In summary, officers have fully considered the scheme against the relevant planning policies and national guidance. On the whole, we fully support a highly energy efficient housing development on a brownfield site that's on an allocated site for up to 650 units in our new local plan. The significant regenerative benefits of the scheme, not only will it contribute towards our ambitious housing target, it would also unlock an otherwise vacant site in Mitcham. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Can I hand over then to Simon?
Thank you and good evening. My name is Simon Lewis and I'm a Planning and Development Director for St William. This is the third application for the site that has been before you at committee, and I wanted to explain why. Fundamentally, current market conditions means it's not viable for private development to cross-subsidise the delivery of affordable housing because returns on private development are too low in most areas of London. The fact that this is a former gasworks makes that more challenging, given the legacy of their previous use, which constrains new development. We are committed to bringing this site forward and have tried to find a viable solution. Our second application, presented at committee earlier this year, was designed to effectively deliver a development comprising 100% affordable housing. However, it was not possible to secure the required level of funding, as some of the homes would have been delivered outside the timescales that grant was available. We've continued to work with the council and the GLA's housing team to try and secure funding to make the development viable and deliverable. This has resulted in our current application. This provides a backstop of no affordable housing because the viability case, as agreed by the council's independent assessor, shows this is not possible. However, this is only a backstop, and we remain committed to delivering affordable homes on the site. Working with the council and the GLA, we're in advanced discussions to secure the level of grant required to deliver the first 146 homes as social rent. Importantly, the grant will be secured via the GLA's current funding programme, meaning a start on site by March 2026, with all homes delivered by March 2030. There will also be an opportunity to secure additional grant funding through the GLA's next funding programme from April 26. St William has offered an obligation within the Section 106 to work to secure the grant for the 146 homes, hopefully to be agreed imminently, and to then continue to seek additional grant for more affordable homes under the new grant programme. This legal obligation is something we need, as currently there is insufficient demand to deliver the scheme as 100% private. The low levels of housing delivery in London demonstrates the cross-subsidy model is not working. You are probably aware that the government and the GLA recently announced a package of support measures to kickstart delivery. This includes the wide use of grant to provide funding for affordable homes in lieu of that previously secured through private development. We understand no one wants to see a scheme of this size with no affordable housing, but we believe the best way to avoid this is to secure the necessary grant. If the application is refused, the opportunity to secure the grant in the immediate future will fall away and no development will come forward. So members need to decide whether they want the council to work with us and deliver a minimum of 146 affordable homes or no homes at all. And we really hope members support the officer recommendation so we can get on, finalise the grant and start construction works as soon as possible. I'm joined by colleagues and other members of the team if you have any questions.
Thank you very much for that. I'll throw, I think that open to questions straight away. Yes, okay. Yeah. Councillor Butcher.
Chair, it's a procedural point.
Yes.
The numbers are raised it once before and I'm raising it again. And also we've got no subtitles. So they're not, if you look, you can't, maybe you can't see it, but see, it's got Councillor Mike Brunt backwards. So I know who that is, but a member of the public
No.
watching this, we'll have to work that out. So can we have,
I'm assured because I also asked for it in the council meeting. It's just in the chamber that it's reversed. The public side of it will be correct.
so do we as councillors have to do things backwards now? Is that a new requirement?
I think that it's within our, yes, it's being looked at, and I think we
And-
just have to live with it in the
And
council.
the subtitles, Chair, that's all. Subtitles and the reverse, thank you.
Right, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to ask the developer, what viability studies were viability studies done before this conclusion? And if they were, how have things turned out so horrendously different to what the initial viability studies said?
Thank you, Chair. It's a really good question, and I can understand why members are trying to understand that last year we were at 35% and now we're at 0. I think the application was originally submitted in the autumn of 2022, and so by the time we got to committee in July 24, things had already started to go quite well, challenging to say the least in London. But we carried on to secure the 35% because we wanted to get a planning permission, rightly or wrongly. However, since then, the viability position has got worse. I think we've seen, certainly this year, there's been a drop off in sales as well. So that there's a number of economic headwinds you'll be aware around build costs, and also the challenges of developing gasworks sites as well. But the drop in sales has also had an impact. And I think that's also reflected in what the government and the GLA are now saying about the emergency measures. But in terms of the viability, we have submitted a viability appraisal for assessment by the council. That has been independently assessed by Carter Jonas. They have drawn the same conclusions as us, that actually the site cannot deliver any affordable housing. I think, as I mentioned in my presentation, up until now, the model of delivering affordable housing primarily has been driven through private development cross-subsidising affordable. Well, that model's broken in London. It doesn't work. And I think that's a reflection on what the GLA and the government are now saying, is that you're automatically looking at grant to go into schemes. And what we're trying to do is exactly the same, but we've done it in advance of what the GLA are trying to introduce. But it is on a number of sites that Berkeley have across London, it's the only way that we can deliver affordable homes.
A few questions. I'm not sure if I should ask them in one go or if you'll come back to me, Chair. But for the first ones, I want to quickly ask about affordable housing. I was hoping Wendy or one of the other excellent team that we have here in Merton could just reassure me or remind us all that we are unable to reject a planning application because it has 0 affordable housing. That's if viability test has been done, and it says affordable housing is impossible. It is not a material. We are unable to reject it for not having any affordable housing, despite it being our local plan. The second question I wanted to ask is, with regards to the mod sheet, I can see that the phrase reasonable endeavours has been used. Can we strengthen that to best endeavours, please? And I can go more into my thinking if that would be helpful. But I know best endeavours is a stronger, more legally watertight term that would ensure the developer really does go dot every I and cross every T to make affordable housing happen. And the third one is, can you shed some light on a hypothetical I might have in terms of what we can and cannot do as a committee? Can we as a committee impose a condition that should, in the future, some registered provider, whoever it may be, purchase these commercial properties, should planning permission be given? Can we tie the applicant's hands and say that, well, they must be sold at the price that the registered provider would have paid were it affordable housing, if that makes sense? So can we tie this future sale price of a development so that should a registered provider purchase it, it would have to be at the price of that they would have paid for, as if it had been affordable housing?
Cap on price. Yes. where should we, with the first is obviously to officers there in terms of can a development be turned down on the basis of the mix and the fact there's no affordable housing in it. Okay, if you could start with that,
Yeah.
please.
So in terms, I'll start with the viability. The policy is written in to allow a review mechanism, and the applicant has submitted a very viability assessment, which has been robustly assessed by our independent assessor, Guy from Carter Jonas. So from a viability ground, they're really, because it's been reviewed and it was agreed and found that the scheme was unviable. So there will be no mechanism to refuse a scheme on grounds of viability. In terms of housing mix, is it housing? Yeah, in terms of housing mix, appreciate the policy in our local plan has provided an indicative housing mix of 34% of 1, 2, and 3 plus beds. However, that is just an indicative mix. And the housing mix is also very intrinsically linked to the viability of the scheme. And the applicant has demonstrated, even without the larger homes, that the scheme is not viable. So again, it would be really difficult for officers to refuse the application on the housing mix. And in terms of reasonable endeavours, we think it would be unreasonable for the council to require the applicant to do something which is commercially disadvantageous to them when they are already taking a commercial risk in a difficult market. Even if we think about best and reasonable endeavours, would it be possible for me to ask the question? How do members envisage a best endeavours? The steps. What is the difference do you envisage is between best and reasonable? That's something I just want to ask. And also, I think what you consider should be done by the applicant in pursuit of the objective, which has been defined in this instance, is to get funding. It's quite binary that they can get funding or they can't get funding. So I just wanted to sort of tease out what you consider best endeavours to look like. Yeah, I'm just thinking in terms of from the first scheme, the original scheme, where we had an secured affordable housing, there was a clause which actually talked about capping the price at the rate published by London, the London Plan or the government guidance. So we could potentially consider that, but that would be I'm not familiar with the scheme, but in terms of the mechanism of capping that.
I'll ask the applicant in a moment to come back on that a bit more, but if you could just clarify what you see envisaging as being the difference between reasonable and best in terms of why you asked the question.
So my understanding is that the best endeavours requires that if something is even commercially disadvantageous, the applicant nonetheless has to pursue it, whilst reasonable endeavours does not have that high threshold. But but it's all about interpretation, right? That's why we have a legal system. It's all about interpretation, and I'm concerned that applicants might interpret something that's commercially disadvantageous is, for example, spending a lot of their resource, a lot of their time, their staff, their employees submitting applications for grant funding that might be, not just from the GLA, but other pots of money that might exist. It's about, I want to have a legally watertight mechanism that ensures that they have to deploy resource to pursuing every single pot of funding possible for affordable housing, which reasonable endeavours. It's up to interpretation, isn't it? It could be that deploying that level of resource might be commercially disadvantageous if they could get 100% commercial. That's a concern that immediately came to my mind, for example. And on the hypothetical, can we carry over that clause that if any registered provider purchases from this development, it won't be at commercial market rates, it will be at affordable housing rates, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Chair. And I think just before we conclude answering to these questions, we do have our legal representative here as well, and I would like a legal view just to back up what I'm going to say. But just in terms of the three questions, my view is that can this be rejected on the basis of just on no affordable housing? Because of the viability assessments that have been carried out by the applicant and also by our independent consultant, which they have come to the same conclusion that it's not viable to have affordable housing on the site. That means that there is no conflict with policy in the development plan. On the basis that that has been demonstrated, then no, there is no reason to refuse it on that basis. At the same time, because the affordable housing can't be guaranteed, there are reasonable stroke best endeavours going to be written in should the planning permission be granted. But at the same time, because the affordable housing can't be guaranteed, that shouldn't really be given weight in favour of the development. So it's almost, you know, it almost they cancel each other out, and it shouldn't be a factor either way, but it should definitely not be a reason for refusal, because we've had that expert analysis and an opinion given to us. So then in terms of reasonable and best endeavours, I know that that's been a topic of conversation at the previous planning committees. But interestingly, during the course of this application, by coincidence, Berkeley had also carried out an application process and appeal process in Brighton, at the Gasholders site in Brighton, for almost 500 homes, and no affordable housing, but with a commitment to carry out reasonable endeavours to make sure that that remained an opportunity. And the appeal was considered by the Planning Inspectorate, and also there was a call in by the Secretary of State. So there were two judgments made, and both the Inspector and the Secretary of State were satisfied that in planning law terms, reasonable endeavours are sufficient for these kind of circumstances to give the council as good a chance as any as getting a positive outcome out of this. So they thought if it was perhaps a commercial arrangement, then it may be a case of looking at best endeavours, but because this is an arrangement with registered providers and the GLA, reasonable should suffice in this case, and that should be of sufficient comfort for members. And in terms of securing affordable housing, it would just be the same way. It wouldn't be a commercial rate. It would be affordable housing written in as per the previous legal agreements. But could I just bring in our legal colleague as well?
Can people hear me?
Mr. Khan, if you could
I have unmuted. Can people hear me?
You're on mute
Sorry.
at the moment.
Hold on. Can people hear me now? I have unmuted. Is it? Sorry, can people hear me, or am I?
It's minimal sound we're hearing, just a
Right,
whisper in the background.
Yeah, I mean, it does show unmute. I mean, what I can do is maybe log off and then log back on. Maybe it works better. Is it?
Give me a sec. Can you speak?
So can I be heard now, Chair? Right.
You can be heard.
Yeah. So in essence, the difference between reasonable and best isn't. It's not as clear cut actually. The case that seems to be mentioned a lot is Jet2 v Blackpool Airport, and in essence, if you're committing to reasonable endeavors, that means you're committing to everything within your capacity to attempt to achieve that. Now, I get that commercial point where there is a distinction where if you are the best endeavor is even the best endeavor isn't an absolute requirement. However, it is established in contract law that if you are on the best, if you have an obligation on the best endeavors, that can be to the detriment of your commercial interests. But in this particular case, and obviously I haven't looked at the viability reports, but the in this case Barclay or St. Williams would be obliged to make every effort to seek this grant as per the terms of the agreement. And we can add, actually, we can add when whoever drafts the 106, the deed of variation, can add to the reasonable endeavors to the satisfaction of the council. And actually, that is slightly higher than just reasonable endeavors. So if the council feels for some reason that the steps taken aren't what they would perceive to be reasonable, then the council can certainly go back to St. Williams, the applicant, and say, listen, in our view, this is not to our satisfaction. So one way to deal with this, I would suggest, is to say reasonable endeavors to the best satisfaction of the council. And that way, we've got a situation where the applicant, I mean, the requirement of reasonable shouldn't be just dismissed offhand. This is definitely an obligation on the applicants to go ahead and make every effort to get the to seek the grant, right? But if we add the word to the satisfaction of the council, that just gives that additional additional element, which says that the onus is simply not on the applicants. The applicants need to show that they have done so and they've made every effort to the satisfaction of the council. Does that make sense? But to be honest, the fundamental, I have looked at this. The case law is a bit. I wouldn't dismiss reasonable endeavors. Reasonable endeavors is a pretty high threshold, but it's imposing an obligation on the applicants to proceed and make every effort to seek that grant, right? But if we add the word, I was considering that this afternoon. I would say we could add to the best to the satisfaction of the council, and that would just give that additional comfort to members of the committee. Does that make sense? Or do you want to?
Very, very
but
helpful,
I
think.
Yeah, but I would certainly suggest that. Right.
Thank you.
And I apologize for the tech issues.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Thank you. I think that's a helpful explanation there. Is that familiar, or has that been used before on development?
Yes, that does sound familiar, actually, Chair, and as officers, we would be content with that.
So in other words, the council will have I'm seeing yes. So our legal advice is, or the suggestion is, that it will be reasonable endeavours to the satisfaction of the council, and so I'm putting to you what your feeling on that is.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think what I would like to do, just to set out our commitment that we've already demonstrated in trying to bring this site forward. I mean, it's frustrating, but we're on our third planning application. You know, there's been an awful amount of resource, time and energy spent to get to this point. I appreciate we're not delivering 35% affordable housing, But even so, you know, we've been on this project for 4 years, so that's a commitment. We were also asked to remove or move the pressure reduction station on the site, which is going to be completed next month at the cost of 4.2 million to us. You know, that's a considerable commitment up front by us. And also, I think in terms of the grant, just to explain the process here, there's 3 parties involved in securing the grant, and the grant is going to come to the council. The council are going to act as the RP, we understand, on this project. So we've been in discussions with your council, with the GLA, a number of meetings to date, where we've agreed in principle the grant that would be needed to deliver the 146 homes as the first homes on the site. So it's really, so we've been very active in that. It's really now down to the council and the GLA to agree the final sum of grant that is needed to fund the 146 homes, and we understand that could be, you know, agreed next month. We're currently drafting the heads of terms for the contract that we would sign with the council, and I understand the council has set out dates in February for when this contract would be presented to both full council and cabinet for approval, that we would then be in time to sign the contract before March 2026 in order to benefit from the grant. So we're very well advanced in the process. I think we've done everything in our power to push this on. I think I said in my presentation, I really want to be very clear here, we can't bring this site forward without the grant. You know, it's essential to making it viable. So it's in our own interest, our own commercial interest, to secure the grant. And I'm afraid I do disagree with what your legal advisor has said. So the satisfaction of the council is pretty woolly as far as I can see, because it depends on who you're trying to satisfy within the council. And given that the council is also an active part of this, it's kind of within your control as well to see how this ends. Reasonable endeavours is something that we use with all authorities across London and outside of London, and it works perfectly well. But we are extremely motivated to get this grant in order to bring the site forward, and I can't stress that enough. But I hope that gives you an appreciation of our commitment to bringing this site forward.
Thank you. I've got 2 councillors with questions who haven't asked yet, so it's Councillor Manning and Councillor Willis. So, and then I've seen you, Councillor Butcher. The second, no, okay, let's take care. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, it's interesting, and you know, we are at our 3rd hearing for this site, and I appreciate that you want to get the job done, as do we. But I have to say, and admittedly, I'm not a developer, I'm just a regular punter. But what I don't understand is that when you are creating a project as a very experienced set of developers with big projects across London, I would have thought at some point before the first application, you would have been looking at viability at that point with a view that things do change financially, politically, all kinds of things can happen along the way, and that you would make contingencies and adjustments and forecasts. So at this late stage on our 3rd application, I find it very hard on behalf of the people who are living around there, who have really been stressed out and struggling with all of this and really want to see this thing built. You know, how we come back to them and say, well, it's all about viability again. I mean, forgive me, but and it may seem that, you know, I'm very naive about finances, but I'm shocked, frankly, that we are still at this point arguing viability to the point where you bring an application that completely negated the affordable housing. Of course, it is now hopefully going to be rescued. But I just think on behalf of the people that have struggled with all of this and really been upset and distressed by the whole procedure, you know, it's a bit of a slap in the face for them. The other thing that I would like to bring up is where we are with contamination, because you've mentioned this figure of over 4 million for the dropping of the, what is it called, the pressure gauge or whatever. Where are we in terms of the progression of decontamination? Have you, are you still able to do the absolute best job you can do to ensure, because these people are suffering and I don't want to see them suffer during any part of this development stage. I want to know where we are with that. And finally, just a tiny little ask, and you can laugh at me if I ask, but I know from the new plan that you have expanded the public realm, and it looks lovely, and I appreciate it. But could we, in that case, put a little bit more parking into a part there, because that was something that the local residents were always very concerned about in terms of impact. If that could be looked at and varied, I'd be very grateful.
I think they're all questions for the developer there. So, yes.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, firstly, I come to the community. I fully understand what you're saying. I think it is challenging for a community to be living next door to a site where there's uncertainty about whether it's going to be developed. I mean, we feel this is probably the sort of last chance at the moment for this site, and hopefully, we get the right outcome. In terms of the viability changes, and it can change on a month-by-month basis. Unfortunately, we are subject to, I was just thinking in my head over the last 4 years, some of the things that have happened. We were at the end of the pandemic, Liz Truss, Trump. There's a whole range of things that can have an impact on what happens, in our economy. And earlier this year, we've seen, well, from the beginning of this year, we've seen a considerable drop off in sales. We're not sure. Again, that could be a reflection on geopolitics or interest rates or whatever. So, if we could have a crystal ball and predict what viability was going to be on a month or a 6 month or an annual basis, that would be brilliant. But unfortunately, we can't. All we can do is react to what's happening. And I think when it comes to the viability, that has been independently assessed by Carter Jonas. There's nothing in there that we are trying to hide. And I think it's really important to understand around the viability that there will be a review mechanism. So the review allows the economics of the development to be reviewed in increments over time. So if there was an improvement, for example, in the reduction in build costs or an increase in sales revenues, then that can generate the delivery of more affordable homes over time. So I think that is something that is there to protect the council and to get more affordable as it comes forward. So I hope that helps to address some of your concerns. Yes, we had a conversation with officers around the condition that relates to car parking, and to see whether or not, when we bring the site forward, that we could try and accommodate some more parking in there. Fully understand where the residents are coming from. We know that's been an issue from day one, so we're very happy to have another look at that. Sorry, yes. So the contamination. So there are two processes in dealing with the contamination. There's what we have to deal with in terms of the submission against planning conditions, but alongside that, we're in discussions with the Environment Agency. It's a very heavily regulated process. Those discussions have been coming on really well. I think we've almost agreed what the remediation strategy will be for the site. I think when we take these sites on, we know it's a concern for residents. We work very closely with them to give them information about how we actually undertake the remedial works, whether there's sort of heavy lifting that's going on the site. So we make them aware through newsletters, etc., and we're happy to commit to that on this site.
Willis. Oh, sorry. Wendy, did you want to come in?
Sorry, is it possible? Sorry, I just wanted to add, just on the viability, the Section 106 does secure 3 stages of viability review. So we have the early stage review, mid-term review, and a late stage review. And and then in terms of the parking, just refer you to the mod sheet on page 2. We have amended the parking to accommodate the potential to review the parking layout to increase parking provision.
I have Councillor Willis and then Councillor Foley.
Thank you, Chair, and I appreciate all the remarks from the applicant. There were, I think, 4 or so speakers on the list. Are we done for speeches from the applicant? No, just we've got like a few names on there. They're only getting the 1 speech. Is that right? Okay, Cool. So I feel in response to the legal advice that actually, if you look at the mod sheet at 8.5.13, this is covered already, because actually it does say that it would have to be demonstrated that reasonable endeavours had been undertaken. So that can be assumed to mean, if we are talking about the council here, that it would have to be demonstrated to Merton that reasonable endeavours had been undertaken to the satisfaction of us, and it says before the scheme could be first implemented. So I'm content with that in regards to the earlier conversation when we were being asked about best and reasonable endeavours. My only real question now relates to, clearly I understand your points in regards to the site allocation, and that this doesn't breach any of the things in the site allocation in regards to height, number of units, etc. However, in the same plan, my question is about deliverability, really, in regards to the housing mix, because in the second approval earlier this year, it was 20% of 3 beds, and now it's, I think, 4%. It was 3% of 3 beds, and now so there were some 4 beds as well, and now there's none. So I just wonder, you know, what work has been done by the applicant on deliverability to know whether in Mitcham there is such a demand for studio and 1-bedroom apartments, considering the strategic housing need assessment that's referred to says that Mitcham is crying out for 3-bedroom units. Thank you, Chair.
Wendy first.
Yep. So in terms of the housing mix, can I just share my screen just so we know the mix? Is that okay? Sorry. Oh, so can you see? Oh, sorry, it's backwards. So yeah, it's fine. Okay, great, thank you. So in terms of the housing mix, like sort of previously advised, is the policy is an indicative housing mix. So we can't just focus on the housing mix. When we are considering a planning application, we need to consider it as a whole and all the material planning considerations. And in terms, also just wanted to add, in terms of 2 beds, the London plan does actually identify 2 beds as suitable for small families. So it can be a form of family housing. So officers, I'm given also the housing mix is also intrinsically linked to the viability of the scheme as demonstrated in the viability assessment. So when you take the whole scheme as a whole, weighing up, taking the planning balance, officers do not consider this to be a harm or an issue, like a material planning consideration that would warrant a refusal. But I don't know whether Berkeley Homes, the applicant, would like to add a bit more.
Thank you, Chair. It is a really good question, and I think the mix is driven by viability to some extent, because the smaller units are more valuable and generate more revenue. There is a demand, I think, for all unit sizes across London. I think what's really, I think we just explain as well in terms of the mix, because the block, I think it's block A, which is the 146 homes which would be delivered for the affordable. That mix, and it's a mixture of studios, 1s, 2s, and a small number of 3 beds. That's considered acceptable by the GLA and the council to deliver as social rented homes, which is really good. I'll be open with you. We are looking at one of the other blocks potentially to come forward for more affordable housing if we can secure grant through the new programme from April 2026, which is I think it's block F. Now we could easily change the mix if it's seen that, from the registered provider, that they wanted more family homes. There is the route through 96A applications to amend the layouts to secure, a more appropriate mix if the registered provider wanted that. But in terms of the market mix, it's driven by viability, but there is flexibility later on if more affordable homes were to come forward.
That's helpful.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm glad Councillor Willis asked that question, because it was something I was going to touch on. But I think I do find myself, I think I should say my day job is property, and since 1989, I have been involved in some very large new home schemes. I've also acted as an expert witness on several occasions, and I do think independent viability studies, as well as the applicants, do carry more weight than perhaps some members of the panel might realise. They are professional, reports that are put in. However, the market has changed as well in the last 4 years. There is a big commercial risk for the developers. And I think we should also remind ourselves that before COVID, we had partners that were agreed for the development of Morden, not going off on a tangent, but the market changed. They got cold feet, understandably. I think it is the property market there's a good degree of uncertainty at the moment, and I can understand why it's changed. I don't like it. I would have liked the affordability units put in there. Who knows, perhaps the local authority may end up buying a block. That would be great. But I can actually understand why this has happened. And whilst it's not perhaps palatable for some members here, I do get it. And I think it should be encouraged. I like the fact that the parking is also being looked at, because I know that the local residents that was one of their complaints. They were under pressure. And I think it's great if the applicant can accommodate some or parking. I think anything would help. It will also help the sale of the flats. So thank you, Chair. Just wanted to say that.
I have a question that focuses on the public transport, and I was the substitute on the committee when we talked about this last time back in July. With approaching 50 more units on the site than was originally envisaged, I'm concerned about the pressure that will put on local public transport, which is basically the 152 bus, which by the time it gets to that point, very often first thing in the morning, is full already because it's got children going to Rains Park High School. And so I think that I'd like some more assurance that there'll be work on the public transport there, and maybe even a 152 or something else starting from there towards Colliers Wood, so that actually speeds the transport through to the network, the underground network. And I wonder whether that can still be included and enhanced from what's proposed at the moment, because just putting an extra bus on the route is not enough, because the route is already clogged and it needs to have a fresh start from there, I think.
Great, thank you, Chair. So yes, the concerns are noted, and I recall in the first application, one local resident wrote in and actually raised the same issue in terms of the buses, as they actually commented that one additional bus service is not adequate. So I did go back to the TfL on this matter, but TfL came back to say there is no evidence, because their statistics are actually just saying one additional bus service is adequate to serve.
As a user, I would dispute that, but maybe we'll discuss that outside. As a user of the 152 regularly, sometimes 3 of them turn up together at outside Sainsbury's at Colliers Wood, that have been held up through Mitcham. So I don't think I think they need to look at their workings there. Maybe a double decker is an option at peak times, but I think that we need to discuss that further.
Yeah, and also just to say, TfL has also reviewed this application in GLA stage 1 and actually raised no concerns in terms of the bus provision.
They don't use the buses then. Okay, thank you. It wasn't flippant and wasn't meant to be dismissive, but so everyone, I've had questions from all those who've raised their hands so far. I'd like to move on to comments, unless you've got a question arising out of something earlier, Councillor Johnson. You do have one. Okay.
I want to ask about the decontamination, because I think the applicant touched on it a bit earlier. You've nearly agreed with the Environment Agency, the strategy for it. Can you give us a sneak peek or a preview about what that is likely to involve? Will it involve digging deep? Because if it involves digging deep, then maybe there's a prospect for more car parking underground, if that makes sense.
In terms of creating a basement, no, that wouldn't be viable, and that's something that was unfortunately it isn't viable on this scheme. I appreciate that would definitely help with some of the resident concerns, but unfortunately not. I mean, To be honest, I haven't got the full details of what the remediation strategy will be. It will be subject to a submission under a planning condition, but the normal process, it will depend. There's normally contaminants which will sit. There'll be hot spots across the site, so some will sit near the surface, some sometimes rest on the aquifer. So there are different processes about how you deal with that. But we have quite experienced. Well, we're very experienced now. We've done this on a number of gasworks sites, and I think again, I just wanted to reassure you, the members, that we do liaise very heavily with the community about the activities that we're doing to make sure, because it is a concern actually. Often the overriding concern outside of tall buildings or car parking. So it's something we take very seriously. We have an in-house expertise that deals with this. And so I just wanted to give that reassurance, and the planning conditions will cover that and manage that process.
Thank you very much, Chair. On the subject of the contamination of the site, we did have extensive discussions and a training session particularly devoted to this for the first application where I was on the committee. One, because obviously lots of concern from local residents. One of the, we got added to the conditions that the assessment of whether the site had been properly decontaminated would be done by an independent firm, rather than by the contractors rather than by the developers themselves. And I'm pretty sure we got that put in as a condition. I wonder if that's in this one, and if not, can it be put in? Because I think that the point was it would give residents more confidence that the developers weren't marking their own homework.
Pausing for an answer there.
We did discuss this, but does Berkeley Homes want?
Yes, I was just going to say, Chair, that we've accepted that with other authorities. We're happy to accept that here. We're very confident in what we do, but we're very happy to have an independent assessor on that as well.
Councillor Willis, is it a question or are we moving on to comments? To comments now. Yes.
Whatever you say, Chair. Yes, this is a comment, which is I think I do appreciate the constructive atmosphere in the room, and the applicant has explained their position. I think that what you are hearing and what needs to be understood is that we are being asked to vote on something with no affordable housing because that is what's on the page. But I just want to say, I've been in this chamber talking about the local plan a lot, and there are policies in the local plan saying that we'll have 50% affordable housing or financial contribution, that we'll have a housing mix, and those things have to be taken in balance. What I want to do now is just thank the officers for their work on some of the things in the mod sheet. So, for example, I feel much more confident with the new paragraph 1.1.8, which says, because we've talked about reasonable endeavours a lot, but that there's going to be that March 2030 bite at the cherry. Basically, by March 2030, they need to check that they've done this. But then also there's the second go, which is here, which basically says, following the above, we will continue to actively engage with the council to look at delivering even more by March 2036. And so that makes me feel much more confident in the affordable elements of the proposal. So I thank you for that.
Any other comments, Councillor?
Thank you, Chair. No, I'd like to also thank officers for working with the applicants. The mod sheet is really good. There's a lot of things in there that I like, and I agree. It's a shame we're voting on something with no affordable housing, but I think it has been explained. With that in mind, hope it doesn't happen again in the future, but it's a huge scheme. There is a lot of commercial risk, and I think it will be good for that end of Mitcham. So yes, that's it. Thank you.
I think, yes, Councillor Hayes.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a very interesting discussion, if not a very long one. We're on phase 3 now. But just to add what Ed's point, I think it will immeasurably improve that part of Mitcham and that part of Maine.
It intrigues me, this viability clause, that if we have a target on affordable housing and then the developers can say viability, I'm not quite sure what the value is in some ways about us having a particular target. But that said, I know that the world has changed as often, to use the cliche, but on the basis that, I mean, we're sort of thinking, I think we haven't said it yet, about what happens with the GLA in terms of grants and all the rest of it. So that, notwithstanding the absence of affordable housing on paper in this particular instance, I think a little bit of imagination on certainly on my part, to look at the wider context and what might be developing, because this is an issue per se about the build mantra. So on that basis, there is the issue of the buses, and it's something we need to return to, engage the GLA with the bus services on some of these development. We had a long discussion way back, I've forgotten what the development was now, about bus service and that. And I have to say, I think the GLA a little bit slow on some of these stuffs about new services. Definitely, they don't seem to be. They seem to be on a track, and they don't seem to be in sync with the dynamic on bus service. That said, I'm prepared to support this application. Thank you. Third application.
I recall visiting a neighbouring road to this development some years ago, where some friends of mine just got married and they were expecting their first child, and they decided not to move to the area because there was an impending redevelopment on that site, and their son is 40 next November. So I think that I welcome the fact that we're actually moving forward, and we'll be able to deliver some homes in the area. And I think that we've heard that there is a willingness to use this as a vehicle to deliver what we actually all want, which is more affordable homes in Mitcham. So thank you for the comments and the questions that have happened tonight. Do we agree the recommendation with the as put before us tonight? We need the numbers. Oh yes, we have to. Sorry, thank you for reminding me of that. Can I have those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for your contributions, and thank you also for the representatives that come. And I'm sorry that we didn't call on your services. Right. Thank you very much. Okay. So I mean, you have an opportunity to leave now, but we're going to move on with the last part of the meeting. So that's fine. Thank you. Planning appeal decisions, item 6. When should they go? Or?
Yep. Thank you, Chair. Members, just going to run through some of the appeal decisions that have come in. Just going to go through some of the appeals that we actually lost, which is unfortunate. But so the first application is 242 Hillcross Avenue. The application is just for a crossover. Officers refused the application based on design and the loss of the grass verge. They have also had some concerns about highway safety and biodiversity due to the loss of the verge. So just quickly there, just shows the plan of the development. So it's crossover there. Scroll down. Sorry, my mouse has stopped working. So if I scroll down, this is the application site there with the arrow, and this is the site here with the front garden, and this is the grass verge, which we're talking about. So in terms of the inspector's comments, the inspector felt that the grass verge in this section of Hillcross Avenue had little amenity value. It would appear as an extension to the existing crossover next door, There are other similar gaps along Hillcross Avenue. The garden, which has been paved over, that could actually been done under permitted development, so it wasn't considered as part of the appeal. It would not appear out of character for the reasons above. And in terms of the loss of the grass verge, it didn't have much biodiversity value. So in terms of highways, the inspector considered there was good visibility in both directions. The road is at low speed limit and not particularly busy. It was an uncomplicated road for motorists to navigate, and reversing on the street was commonplace. So in terms of lessons learnt on that one, officers and maybe members can take greater scrutiny of how the proposal would directly respond to the wider area, both visually and how the highway would operate, and does permitted development offer a fallback position. Next scheme was for Fortescue Road in Colliers Wood. That was a change of use from a dwelling house to a 5-person HMO. So it's refused on discrepancies on the plans and the application form, poor standard of accommodation, and unsuitable refuge cycling and bin storage. So this is the plan here. I think the main concern from officers was the standard of the accommodation. So at first floor level here, it had a lounge area which had no window, so it'd also be not a pleasant place for residents. However, the inspector considered that whilst this was not ideal to have a living space and no windows, at ground floor level there was ample space created by this kitchen and living area. So overall, the development would meet space standards for an HMO. All the bedrooms would have suitable space for furniture and fittings. Like I said, the ground floor was oversized in terms of the space for the residents. And whilst the first floor again was not considered very nice, and the accommodation that was the residents could use out of choice rather than necessity. So on that one, lessons to be learnt. So greater scrutiny of the standard of accommodation as a whole and how the space could be used, and use of planning conditions restricting the number of occupants of the HMO where concern is identified. So in that instance, there was some 2 double bedrooms. So officers were concerned it'd be used for more than 5 residents, and use of conditions to overcome reasons for refusal. 25 Charnwood Avenue in Wimbledon, that was just for some extensions to the property, a 2-storey side extension. This is the property here. Hip to gable roof extension and some roof lights. So officers refused the application on design, being visually intrusive and unsympathetic, and also a lack of a fire safety strategy. Right, so this is the application site here. So the inspector, I've highlighted the proposed extensions on it just for ease of reference. So the inspector considered that the submission of the fire strategy at the appeal stage was fine, and officers agreed with that. The property itself has already been extended, and there was a previous planning permission for roof extensions. So as you can see from this image here, so this is the application site, and at the other end of the terrace, this property has already had a hip to gable and some other roof extensions. So the inspector considered that the proposal would actually restore some symmetry to the terrace. There are numerous other roof extensions in the area, which you can see from some of the photographs. And the existing extensions of the properties appeared disjointed, and this would actually be an improvement. So on balance, it would improve the appearance of the property and the terrace as a whole. So lessons to be learnt, fully to consider the plan history of the sites and previous approvals. Not all large extensions are unacceptable. A greater scrutiny of the existing situation, including the application site wider context. Just 2 more to go. So this one, 7 Circle Gardens. This application was for a 1-storey rear extension. This is the site here. It was refused on the impact on this property next door, number 5. It was refused on visual intrusion, sense of enclosure, and overshadowing. It's quite a deep extension. This is the extension here. It was 6 meters deep. However, there was a small gap between the application site and number 5. Again, here's quite a large flat roof extension, 1-storey rear extension. But the inspector considered that from the patio area, which is here, and the level of existing screening along the boundary, that the extension wouldn't appear too harmful. And whilst there would be an increase, the extension will be viewable from this point of the extension because it's away, but the inspector considered because it was quite far away from the patio and the property itself, while you would be able to see it, it wasn't harmful. So lessons to be learnt on this one, again, greater scrutiny of the surrounding area and also the existing level of amenity for neighbours. So in that instance, there was a high boundary fence, there was a gap between the neighbours, and also on how the garden was used. On to the last one is Nelson Trading Estate down by South Wimbledon Tube Station. So this is what was for an interminated holding sign. So this is the sign here, the existing sign, which is backlit. Officers refused the application because we were concerned on highway safety. So this is the existing hoarding here. This on the right here is the proposed one, similar in size, slightly bigger, but the main difference, this will be a digital screen. So inspector's comments referred to the planning policy guidance on signage, which states that in commercial areas, these are likely to be acceptable. And this one is close to commercial units. So it's in a commercial setting, and what we need to consider is the brightness of these signs and the size, but the inspector considered that could be conditioned, so to safeguard highway safety. Approaches to the sign there'd be clear views of the sign, so it wouldn't just pop out of nowhere and suddenly appear. Also, the existing highway network was not particularly complicated in that area, so the drivers and pedestrians shouldn't really have to worry too much because it's quite an easy junction. So lessons to be learnt from that: greater consideration of the planning policy guidance, of the existing situation and how the proposal differs, and greater consideration of the existing highway network. And that's the end, yeah.
Two out of 5 in Merton Park, I think, there, wasn't it? Councillor Willis and then Councillor Mandy and Councillor.
An unusual.
Sorry,
Oh,
Councillor
I
Willis.
do beg your
Yes.
pardon. Sorry, I didn't
was
hear it.
listing the people that was calling, yes.
It's not a problem at all. The digital signs. So we've just heard appeal allowed, but there was appeal dismissed on Wimbledon Hill Road, which was good. I wonder whether we're able to use any sort of because the council's got all these sustainability aims, net zero 2030, etc., and yet we're continuing to power digital signs via the road network. I see that you've got some lessons to be learned there about commercial areas, but these are popping up increasingly in residential areas like the centre of Rains Park, where there's a giant one run by Network Rail on the corner of Amity Grove, where residents say they are too bright. What are we able to do as a borough to stop these things from happening if they do not have the support of residents?
Well, as part of the application, we will consult neighbours, so we'd like to hear their views on these applications. If they're not happy, we can, of course, consider those objections. And we've referred to the planning policy guidance in terms of the brightness. So they should adhere to those brightness levels. And if they do, then we'd grant permission. If they don't, then we could refuse the application.
Again, apologies for yes. An unusually long list of appeals, and yes, I think maybe it's just a space of bad luck or things like that. I mean, the one about the sign, as Councillor Wilson mentioned, and I could understand if it was in a residential area because of light pollution and distraction and things like that. But it seems a shame that one sort of. But is there any sort of? Is it just a case of we've just been unlucky and we've had a bit of a spate? Because I don't recall this many happening in a year. Maybe you have some opinion on that. And is there a cost to the council on these particular appeals that we're bearing that is not such a great thing?
On the positive note, we did win 8. We lost 5, but we did win 8. So I should have said that at the beginning. There was no cost on any of the applications, which is obviously very good.
Okay, I'd just like to add to that as well. Yeah, I didn't like seeing the being 5 going against on the list. I have to say, I do find advertisements to be particularly unpredictable, what inspectors are going to do with them. It's really, really difficult to call, and we're having to look at these closely to try and predict what would happen. But they tend to be, applications like that tend to be subjective, and so we're very, very unlikely to lose costs if we've come to a subjective judgment. The other area I think is house extensions. The inspectors do seem to be allowing more, and it does seem to all be about allowing more building, and I think we need to adjust to that. But the good news overall is there's been no change in an update I've previously given, where we lose less than 1% of all our appeals overall. We are actually, before we get in trouble from central government, we're allowed to lose up to 10%. So we're well within that. So we can afford to risk refusing something if we think that's the right thing to do. But yeah, we're going to try and not have 5 on the next list.
Yes.
And I'm aware that you are a very busy team and you work extremely hard and are highly responsive. And I'm extremely grateful to you all, because our working relationship is priceless. It really is, and on all applications that we deal with. And I'm sure this has just been an unlucky situation. I wonder if there is time you could potentially update the committee on the recent things that have been going on at the Burnbullock that members may not be aware of, in terms of the scaffolding, just to because there's a lot of stories that float around. If there's a moment that could be spared for that, I'd be grateful.
Yeah, so I think, well, that brings us on to the enforcement report, actually. I think that's...
Let me take
Oh, sorry.
Johnson first.
I think my question was somewhat answered, in that there's no cost to losing these appeals, and it's just the nature of these appeals which means there are no cost. Is that correct? Because one of the questions I originally was going to ask was, I can see one of the appeals we lost was because the applicant subsequently on appeal submitted a fire safety report, and it would seem bizarre that he fixed his application in appeal, and yet we're expected to pay costs, if that makes sense. But
that can be a source of frustration when there's additional information becomes part of the process. But no, there was no risk of costs with these appeals.
Question there. I just wonder what, with the advertising, the moving advertising signs, because that one happens to be in my ward that I just saw there. It is parallel with traffic lights. So to what extent can we review that if there are accidents known to have happened as a result of that, of moving images next to traffic lights? Or what control do we have about the nature of the movement there is on the screen? Because slow movement is not a problem, but anything fast at a set of traffic lights could be a problem for drivers.
So all advertisements applications are judged on the basis of visual amenity and highway safety. They're the two key considerations. So we always consult the highways team when we do receive one of those applications.
And we turn this one down. So
yes, so that yeah.
Now come back appeal, but to what extent can we monitor that? That's
yes, the highways team will do that, and they may have their own regulations if it becomes a safety problem that they can act on.
Beyond, so that I think we note the report for the planning appeal decisions. Yes, moving on then to the planning enforcement, and then picking up on the question that Councillor Manley raised.
Yes, well, just on the Burnbullock, I've been to sites in the last couple of weeks, as has Wendy actually, and we have picked up that there has been some removal of the scaffolding, unfortunately, by the scaffolding company. We have been assured that another scaffolding company will be brought in to reinstate or construct new scaffolding there. But we are going to have an internal discussion about what to do about that, I think. And yeah, just in terms of enforcement more generally, we've got the statistics up on the screen. So we have 255 enforcement cases, which is the normal really. We have slightly reduced them because we've had 15 new complaints but closed 25 cases. We have served 4 new enforcement notices, 3 of which are breach of condition notices in this period. We are on track actually for we've been back through our records I think over the last decade, and by the end of this year it appears that we will have served more enforcement notices than in any of those previous years. So the team has been very active. And all the other good news is we had a big backlog of appeals that were with the planning inspectorate, but they're coming down. We've only got 5 outstanding now before we can move on, and that's why you see that there are more prosecutions now. We've got 4 prosecutions in hand, and just because the tree service, the private tree service, comes under enforcement as well, we've had 50 tree applications. Our tree officer, I have to say, is remarkably consistent and has determined 97% within time, which is excellent. So I think the big news from this period, if we could just scroll down a page. So we have had some success in terms of, well, we did have an advertisement consent sign that you can see there without consent on the Broadway. We managed to get that removed. But the major news really was that we've started our untidy land programme, and we took direct action at 87 Park Avenue. You can see there the before and after images. We're very pleased with that. 2 tons of rubbish went, so it was well worth doing. And that was the first one of our programme. We managed to get a good arrangement for that because we adjusted our contracts with Veolia and they took the direct action for us. We feel that that was value for money, and we do have a budget now to be able to carry out similar work at some other sites, and we are just about to select the second one. We've got about 8 or 9 on the list, and we will be coming back to members actually to explain more about how to go about reporting untidy land and what the process is likely to be from there, because there are different teams that have different powers for slightly different circumstances, particularly if the untidy land affects the highway in any way, particularly if it's attracted pests onto a site. Then you can talk to the highways team, the environmental health team, and perhaps the antisocial behaviour team as well. So we're going to set something out about that, and I'll come back with more details. But yeah, if we just scroll down a little bit more, we've got another untidy land site there, Abercrombie Way. We didn't have to take direct action there. Our negotiations with the landowner worked, so that was cleared up. And I was really pleased as well because we were quite concerned, 1, that it might be dangerous, and 2, that it was certainly looking a mess. But at the Abbey wall, the listed wall, we've managed to get that repaired as well. So we were pleased with that. And then the rest of the report just details the breach of...
Excuse me, John.
Yeah.
At the Abbey wall, was that the responsibility of the authority?
Yes, it was. It was. Okay. In the end, it was. And
well, we have a listed wall, or we have 2 listed walls in Merton Park that are being not looked at, and they're in disrepair. One is St Mary's Church, where we had a fall down 2 years ago. It was repaired, but the rest of it is leaning that was left. Yeah. And there's also Church Lane playing fields, which is in a bad way. Yeah. And maybe I should write to you because nothing's being done, and it's suddenly going to go. People are worried.
Yeah,
it needs tackling. I'll email you.
Yes, please. And we did work with a local group on Abbey Wall.
Right.
Yes, we were.
Okay.
We were involved.
I'll be in touch. Thank
you. Hey, is it on?
Yeah. Just first of all, thanks very much for Park Avenue. That's 2 years you know, 2 years.
Yes.
That took, and I know Councillor Judge has been driving and a budget's been set aside. But the thing is about those type of things like that, how terrible it was. It's amazing how when you talk to residents, how they don't get that you can't fix it. And so I welcome the report because they think you're the councillor, get it sorted. And I know, just as an aside, in Germany, it's different. You have a responsibility for everything to the roadway. So I think that's really good, and I welcome it when we have a session on that, Chair. But just one, and apology is if I've missed this, separate thing, do it all in one. On the tree applications, right, because I've got a few tree problems, is there any breakdown of what it is? Because mine tend to be tall trees, and you don't get the complaint in the winter because there's no leaves. In the summer, they roll in because it blocks people's view. And I have to say, and I know they're doing a fantastic job putting the trees up, but I don't think people, the response I've had, and it's still being dealt with, from the tree people, it was a bit stock, if you know what I mean. So can you have you got a breakdown of the trees on the tree issues? Thank you.
We can, yeah, we can do. That's, yeah, we can break that down further.
All right, thanks very much, John.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, in line with this new process, which, you know, is so welcome in terms of untidy land, because I've got a few reports I've yet to submit to you guys. Lower Green West, the old fire station, what a relief it was to finally see that tidied up, and what a beautiful building for everyone to look at. And can I just say how grateful the ward and the residents were that it was done in time for the Remembrance Sunday service, because it's right next door. And it was so beautiful, and we are, as a group of residents and ward councillors, very grateful to you and your team, because you were quick and it was painless. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And yeah, I was just going to mention that the rest of the report just goes into a little bit more detail about those breach of condition and enforcement notices that we've served.
Is the report noted? I think that concludes. If you want to have a debate about a glossary of terms, which I suppose you do want to, that concludes the meeting for tonight. Thank you very much for your contributions and for guiding us through it, officers here, and to Jade. So I'd like to announce the next one is not only unlikely to take place, but we're cancelling it, aren't we? The December meeting.
Yes, we are working on some major schemes at the moment at Majestic Way and then Rainbow Industrial Estate at Rains Park, but we're, for different reasons, we're not going to have those quite ready for December.
Okay, so in that case, I'll even though it's not the end of November, I'll wish you a happy Christmas and safe journeys home tonight. Thank you. Thank you.